I don't have only a pessimistic message. That's simply the reality to depict. This is no exaggeration. This is simply a warning against what is in the future unless we change the way we produce and we consume. There have been enormous progress, especially in the wake of the food price crisis in 2008. You know that food prices have increased, that doubled overnight between 2007 and 2008. They have come down somehow between 2009 and 2010, and they have again started increasing 2011, and a new increase in 2012. Just very quickly, one reason why the food prices are increasing is because for the first time, the pace at which we use the food and the pace at which we produce the food are no longer matching. In the past, we produced more food and we used, let's say, less in terms of rate of progression. But this has changed because food today is also used for energy. And it's used for biofuels, and energy is a huge market. Using food for producing energy has the potential to absolutely absorb all the food we produce. So the use today of food and the current pace of increasing the use of food is a major responsible for these food prices. That does not mean that the biofuels are the main responsible, because the trigger of all these food price crises were, in fact, climatic events. Today, it's the drought in the U.S. that is triggering the increase in the maize, and from maize, it's migrating to other cereals because of the substitution factors. In 2008, it was both the drought in Australia and the floods in Asia that concomitantly causes an increase in the price in rice and in the price in wheat. But it just shows that we have become more fragile. The situation today, the global situation, is simply more fragile. Why is it more fragile? Because we have a number of countries, 10 countries, that produce and export the bulk of what we consume. We have 10 countries around the world that are feeding the world. That is a simple reality. So unless we rebalance that and we have more production coming from the developing countries, from Africa where resources, for example, are available, this fragility will continue. So anything badly that will affect the US or affect Russia and Australia will have an immediate impact on the world food prices and will then affect the consumption of food in many developing countries. So the need for rebalancing the production is an absolute necessity, and this can happen and will happen only if we invest more in agriculture in the developing countries and more in the smallholder production. Because also feeding the world is not a general purpose only. It happens at the local level. It happens at the level of the village. It happens at the local of the community. It's not enough that the country is able to buy the food it requires. Many developing, exporting, oil exporting countries, including in Africa, are able to buy the food, whatever the price are, because the oil prices are increasing even faster. But unfortunately, that does not always translate in the meal of each household and each individual, because that individual or that particular household may not have the means of the income to buy that food. So we need to think globally in terms of rebalancing, but we need to think locally in terms of providing opportunities for income and production. My second positive message, thanks in particular to the civil society, but not only to the civil society, to the UN continuous action and to the leadership taken by certain government over the last year, including developing governments that have put the food security at the top of the agenda of the 20. There are several ongoing reforms that have the potential to change the governance of food security around the world, and one of them is the Committee on Food Security that Peter Proof mentioned earlier. This Committee of Food Security, established by the Rome-based agencies, FAO, the World Food Programme, WFP, and IFAD, International Fund for Agriculture and Development, three of them based in Rome, are bringing together all the UN agencies, all the governments that are member states of the three institutions, the civil society and the private sector, to create a forum to debate openly on all the food security and nutrition problematics. It is assisted by a high-level panel of experts, very renowned experts, that have the mandate to carry out technical analysis, scientific analysis on any of the subjects that the forum believes is important for clarifying policy options to address food security and nutrition. And it is, let's say, steered by an advisory group of member countries of UN that help maintain, let's say, the progress and ensure the continuity of the recommendation of the policy forum and translate them and support their implementation. This is the most comprehensively open forum today. More than 80 NGOs are part of that forum and contribute to it. The private sector, again, is represented, and they have the ability also to voice their own concerns and share their experiences and the lessons learned. And this committee has already some good achievement, given that it was reformed in 2009, but in fact started only working sometime in 2010. It has issued this the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure and land fisheries and forest. That's considered a major achievement. You all perhaps remember the discussions and the debates, controversies around the issue of land grab following the food price crisis in 2008, where enormous amount of money coming from both government, rich government, but also speculative funds were acquiring huge amount of land in Africa, and the controversies that this has created, in particular the risk of spoliating the rights of indigenous population and the impact this may have negatively on both the management of resources of the African countries and their own agricultural production. The CFS has taken up this issue, and today there is a consensus, generated a consensus among all the member countries on these responsible guidelines on tenure of land, fisheries and forestry. There are other ongoing works, including the high-level forum on addressing food insecurity in protracted crisis. Fragile states, those states that are affected by conflicts, mostly in the east part of Africa. And there are the guidelines for responsible investment in agriculture. So I will perhaps stop here. I hope I did not exceed too much of the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ould Ahmed. Now, we've been working together globally for some years to address the phenomenon of land grabs, no? Now we are meeting here today to talk about another type of grab, the grab of decision-making power affecting food and nutrition. And I think I'm particularly grateful to Mr. Ould Ahmed for having illustrated for us in a bit more detail the nature and the functioning of the Committee on World Food Security and the inclusiveness that it represents, the inclusiveness of civil society and social movements in those policy spaces. And that, we think, is a really important pushback against the decision-making power grab that is our key concern here today. So thank you for that, Mr. Ould Ahmed. Now, I'd like to ask a question to Lalji Desai. You represent a global community, a global network of nomadic pastoralists and indigenous communities. What does this problematic look like from that perspective in practice? What are the impacts that your constituency observe with regard to these issues? Please.
Thank you very much for providing this opportunity. I'm really very happy that today I am in a position to raise the voice of my community, our pastoralists worldwide. We are over 300 million, but still unseen, unheard. When there was a negotiation was going on in FAO on voluntary guidelines, we had to struggle a lot to add one word, and that is pastoralist. Almost for 3 days continuously, I was shouting, doing, look, please add my community. I mean, it was like almost unseen on all UN when they prepare any guidelines, any policies. There is no pastoralist in it. And it's not the case of the only UN and UN organization. When my country decide the policy, when my country is making a land policy, they only talk about farmer. And there is no clarity about which farmer they are talking about, the large farmer, corporate farmer. There is nothing about the different food producer and particularly about the pastoralist community. And after independence in India, the way in which my country has decided the land policy, and that land policy is going against the pastoralists, and not only in India. We have seen in Mali, in Kenya, in Mongolia, wherever we go. Common property resources are very soft target. And most pastoralists, we have still our own values and ethics, and we believe that land is not for a sale. I mean, still my old age people, they believe, how can we buy or sell land? And because they were dependent on the common property resources, they do not have a title. And today, when somebody grabs the land, legally or illegally, the community who is dependent on common property resources, particularly nomadic people, they do not get any compensation rehabilitation. They lose their livelihood, they lose their resources, their identity. In our culture, we have lots of says, and that says very clearly, and that one in Gujarati, in my language, is mane dhawai, dowai nahi. That means we can drink the milk from the mother. We can have a milk from the mother, but we cannot milk, the milking cows. It's not like, so we cannot do that with the mother, and that is Mother Earth, not about only our own mother, but it's talking about the Mother Earth. We feed them, they feed us. Because we feed livestock, so they feed us. But today, there is no grazing land to feed livestock. And the livestock, the fodder price, and when somebody says that why the milk price is going very high, why the meat price is going very high? Because there is no fodder. We have to buy fodder, and when the fodder price goes very high, it's automatically government can say, oh, this is unviable livelihood system, so we need to have a bigger dairy farm, and this pastoralism is no more sustainable. So they have now studies and all. So that is one thing which we are facing today, and they have declared that pastoralism is unviable. The movement is restricted. Pastoralists, those who are migrating from one place to another place. The countries are divided. We have boundaries. We have state boundaries. We have district boundaries. We have when colonial came to India, and they have divided land into different categories: forest land, government reserve land, agriculture cultivable land, waste land, and those different kind of land segregation happened. And that land and the division of that land is purely to control the land, and they are controlling that land. And so pastoralists are now do not have access to that land. We are having a movement for demanding a land. Government is not willing to give, and at the same time, government is advertising for a corporate to give a land and with a subsidy 2,000 hectares of land for one corporate house for a corporate agriculture, corporate farming. So it's a very contradiction that why those who are real food producers, they are losing their land and others are getting. I'm not commenting on anybody, but when I see, I was reading the one sentence, how to feed world in 2050. When I discussed with my community were laughing. That who is going to feed the world? It is a community. We are going to feed ourselves if the nation does not intervene in our livelihood directly. Like, no, they do not disturb us, then we can feed ourselves. That was their answer. And another thing is need to stop the diesel economy. When we say diesel economy, when we produce food in my village, we produce milk in my village. My neighbor is producing the milk. It goes to the dairy cooperative. They transport to the 200 or 300 kilometers. They do packing, pasteurizing, transportation. Then again, the same pouch of the bag is coming to my village in the shop, and people are buying it. So it's all, we are wasting energy. We need to have a local food for a local people. And like, we have a culture of having a raw milk. We do not have a culture of having a pasteurized milk. And we are all very healthy with the raw milk. I mean, there's nothing wrong in it. And so what happened? Like, because still, no, like culture is still, it's in our mind. People in India, we get the pasteurized milk from the dairy cooperative, from the shop. When the bag comes to home, we boil it, make it cool again, and put it into freeze. So like, it's like 5 times we are wasting energy. So like it's a wastage of energy also. That's what, so my community was laughing. Let's live us on our own way and do not grab our land. We will feed ourselves. That was their answer. Today, I'm really happy. While, like this publishing of this report, 7 years back, we were always thinking nobody is going to listen this, nobody is going to talk about us. But when we started talking in the FAO, and now I become a member in advisory group there in CFS. So at least my community and the pastoralists globally, we feel that, okay, if we have a space, there is a ray of hope. So that's why really we are very happy with the global process and this kind of effort, which can give opportunity and the platform and space for the people it's all about right to life. And I say, we were having one exercise with the community. The community were describing, if we lose the control over the decision, if we are not in a position to making decision, we are going to lose our resources. And if we are going to lose our resources, means of production, once we lose means of production, it's very clearly, it's all about the food sovereignty, and we'll lose food security and we'll go to hunger. So that's the sequence. And I think in report, it's very, very clearly they mention. And it's like, I feel that when I was reading the report, I felt, oh, it's our voice. They're talking about us. We have one song that says, why this Kolaveri? Kolaveri D. I mean, that song is in Tamilian language, but they said, why this inequality? Who is controlling? Who is grabbing? For what? Who has the control over market, seed, breed? And for what? To feed the world or for making profit? That's what, I mean, we need to answer. And it's whose need we are going to fulfill. And we described 2 different ideologies, and particularly my community, because last year for a land right, there was the killing of pastoralists. 9 pastoralists was killed in our area. And we had to protest just for arresting people who is a killer. I mean, why today we have such a governance system where we have to demand for a justice, where we have to demand for a food? Why it's not like a decentralized decision making and decentralized food production system where we have equal access to and control over resources? When I was in Canada, I mean, I'm not blaming any country, but just giving example. In a big store, there was a Kesar mango from southern Gujarat. And it was full of, all stores were full with the Kesar mangoes and different mangoes and very good quality. And the Vedva, the community who is producing food, the Kesar, they are not able to eat that Kesar. I mean, that is a kind of the inequality we have. In my villages, when we were discussing in the 3 groups, old age group, middle age group, and the teenagers group. And I was looking at 3 groups. They were discussing very well. They were discussing about the food sovereignty and pastoralism. And I saw the old age people with very shining skin, very healthy. They were looking very good health. And the middle age, it's middle, and the teenagers were really very weak. They were all they're facing a problem of the malnutrition. And that because people are supplying the milk to the urban cities, those who can afford to buy that milk. And the people, those who are producing milk, they are going hungry. They are facing a malnutrition. So that is, I mean, what the reality that we have discussed. So my community, when this people says that when today the world is discussing about the 5 major issues, and the 5 major issues, it is all interlinked. Climate crisis, food crisis, job crisis, peace crisis, fuel crisis. We need to think from that viewpoint. It's all crisis is created crisis. And the indigenous way of life, organic way of life, is the answer to all that 5, the global problem. And how? That's 1 minute I would like to take if there is. What our pastoralism or indigenous people's culture is, what we believe in, and what today's world we are living in. Nuclear families, competition everywhere, from educations to job for everywhere. Talking about dependency, and mainly talk for independency, but goes to the dependency. Lack of ethics and value in production or in day-to-day life. Exploitative lifestyle. Don't mind to exploit natural resource or anything. Just consume. Copyright. When we write one piece of paper and then write copyright. Lalji's copyright or XYZ's copyright. And everything is for profit. That's what today's. But what pastoralists, indigenous peoples, I mean, because why? They are the answer to the problem. Living together with the unity. Instead of competition, supporting. We have Arsi-Parsi concept still. If my animal dies in the drought, my community will support me. Sustainability. Do not exploit natural resources, but think about the sustainable use of that. Conservation. Sharing of resources, territories, knowledge. And it's a way of life, not just for a profit. That's what the pastoralists, indigenous people can offer. So this is how I can conclude that we need to rethink. We need to think from the perspective of the indigenous people, from the pastoralists, from the nomadic people. And it's all about the decision making, how to involve them in a decision making so we can feed ourselves, everybody can feed themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lalji, for that very useful reality check. And I can well imagine the amusement of your communities when they hear how some of these issues are discussed and dealt with at the international level. And I think what you have said helps encourage us to focus on reframing that question away from how to feed the world in 2050 to how are we going to ensure food and nutrition justice today? How are we going to ensure that the people affected, the food-producing communities, and the communities suffering hunger, all too often they're the same, how are we going to ensure that they are the ones in the driver's seat of policy on food and nutrition? So now I'm going to hand the floor to Flavio Valente, Secretary General of FIAN International, who will seek to encapsulate some of the issues and concerns that have been discussed here today, raised in this publication, and maybe to highlight some steps forward. Thank you, Flavio.
Good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here launching the 5th Right to Food and Nutrition Watch in partnership with the consortium, and basically inspired by the struggle of the peoples that, Lalji represents a part of that, and you get from representing another part of the constituency. It is for these movements